me tell you why this topic is so important. Just this morning. So I'm walking out to the garage in my neighborhood. And by the way, I live in what you would call I would say a decent neighborhood on a very, very, very nice block around some very nice homes. And I'm walking out to the garage and I see a gentleman crouched over my neighbor's car right outside his garage. And looks like he's up to no good. So I basically kind of stare down at him, and then when he sees me, he jumps up. He hides on the side of the garage. And so I'm looking at the time because I want to walk down there and see what's going on. As I would hope my neighbor would do if somebody was next to my garage, right? And so I say to myself, well, let me go ahead and throw everything in the car. So I put everything inside the car. I step back outside the garage and look down the alley again. There he is. And so I holler down the alley like I hope my neighbor would do. And by the way, the other man that I'm looking at who's crouching over this car is a brother, right? So like, hey, bro, you need to keep it moving, man. And he kind of waves me off and goes on the side of the garage where I can't see him. So I think to myself, wow, okay. So I get in the car. I pull out of the garage and close my garage, make sure my stuff is handled, right? Because this guy's out and about. And then I drive down the garage towards my neighbor's home at the end of the block where this is happening. And there he is on the other side of the garage, trying to hide. And so I roll down the window and I hit the horn real loud and I say, hey, man, you need to keep it moving. And he told me to mind my own business. Now, you might say, well, Linal, that's not why I tuned in this morning. I saw on Instagram, I saw on Facebook, I saw on different social media channels that you're going to talk about lessons to teach my son. And, well, that's part of what I'm getting at because I thought it was surreal that this happened. And so, I roll down the window and I tell him, man, you need to keep moving, man. This is not your property. And this is my business. This is my block. This is my neighborhood. This is my city. Okay. And so I hit the horn again. I start laying on the horn. He runs off down the block. And so then I called the police and let them know, hey, this is my address. This is what's happening. You need to send a patrol car over. Looks like someone is trying to do something they have no business doing with my neighbor's property. All right. What's the point? As I was driving in, I'm thinking about the topic and I thought, man, that's somebody's son. That's somebody's baby boy. At some point, someone was looking at him, or I believe, or I hope that someone was looking at him very much the way I look at my son. Very much the way we look at our young men when they're 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. They're babies. And somewhere along his journey, something went wrong. And what I imagine is that someone lacked a vision for his life. Now, part of it is our responsibility, right? And I think about my son, Legend. He's got to make some choices. At some point, he's going to have to make some choices. And so part of that is going to be his responsibility. But here's what I do believe, and it's something I'm going to start off today in terms of the lessons to teach my son. This series is, as parents, as fathers, we have a great deal to do with where our children end up, who they become, how they turn out, and what they end up doing. Now, there is a point, and my mom was in the studio a few weeks ago. Somebody asked, well, at what point is a child fully responsible for themselves? And there's a point where a child becomes fully responsible for themselves. But man, if while they are a child, while that boy is a son, and he always will be a son, but when he's a son as a child, as a toddler, as an adolescent, as a teenager, if you're pouring into him, then the likelihood of our sons becoming criminals, the likelihood of the justice system taking advantage of our young boys, okay? The likelihood that they'll end up killed, the likelihood that they'll end up many of the ways that we see our young men ending up, that won't happen if we have a vision for our boys. Now, I want to be clear. This is lessons to teach my son, and it's coming from a very personal place. And I do believe that if you have a daughter, what I'm going to share in this series throughout the month is going to be just as important, just as helpful to you as it would be to any father listening or any mother listening that has a son. But this is coming, like I said, it's coming from a very special place because, I have a boy. And when you think about the statistics for our young men right now, my heart goes out to black boys because I used to be one. And I remember what it felt like to make it through a summer here in Chicago and just breathe a deep sigh of relief. I made it. I'm alive. I made it. I'm alive. And I hear people talk about the crime rate. I hear people talk about the murder rate in Chicago as it stands now. And it was nothing like think about it. When I was growing up in the 90s, it was double what it is today. And we still have a lot of work to do. And, when I think about a black boy, as soon as a black child is born in America, they begin to be bombarded by lies. And if we're not intentional about addressing these things, then this is where we begin to lose our sons. Now, let me share some of the lies. One of the first lies is you are not enough. You're not enough. You are not valuable. You are not valid. You are not smart. You won't be smart, and you're not smart enough. You lack worth. These are the lies, by the way. You are not beautiful. You are not beautiful. Your life is not sacred. Your people have made no contributions in this country. America is not yours. Your people weren't involved in the hard work to establish and create this country. This country is not yours, and you do not get to reap the benefits of America. These are some of the lies that they're bombarded with. Now, let me be clear. These lies are not overtly told. They're subliminal. These lies come from the media. These lies come from what people are watching. These lies come from all around us. But they permeate the subconscious. And this is what our young boys are dealing with day after day after day as they intake media that, by the way, that's all around us. It's in our cell phones. It's on the television. It's on the radio. It's in the music. All around us. And so, as fathers, as parents, if we are not intentional about how we teach our children, then many of our sons will end up like the man that I ran into this morning. Or they'll end up as just another statistic. Many of the lessons that I'll be sharing over the course of this series are lessons that I've recently learned as a man, right? And they're also lessons that I believe are not just exclusive to boys and men. A mother should teach her daughter these lessons, and every man should take the lessons that I share and make them a part of their own lives in terms of how they live and how they teach their sons. I believe that. Okay. Now, let me share real quick how this topic came about. This topic came about 2 years ago, and right before I had my son. So my son was born June 19th, 2017. And as you know, it's June 2019. And so, 2 months before I had a month before I had my son, I was thinking a whole lot about what would I teach him. And I have this sense of finality. And here's what I mean by that. Life, I get that life is dynamic. I know that life is dynamic. And when I think about my son, I want to make sure that no matter what happens to me, okay, no matter what happens to me, that he has these lessons. Now, the prayer I prayed, I want to see my son grow old and become a mature man. Okay. My wife and I, we like to have more children. So it's not just about him. Okay. But it'll be about my other children. I mean, who knows? One day I might be teaching lessons to teach my daughter. All right. But my point in saying all this is at the same time, life is dynamic. I don't know what's going to happen. And so I've always looked at my life events, the big life events that I've been blessed to have with intention, with a high level of intention. Let me give you an example of what I mean. When I first became a leader, the first leadership position I ever got, that was a life event, right? Why? Because I believe leadership is a huge, huge responsibility. And so that was a life event. And I said to myself, okay, how am I going to properly step into this event? And so what I did is I created my guiding principles for leadership. And these were principles that I live by as a leader, right? 7 principles that I want to live by as a leader to mark this event in my life when I first became a leader, or was first titled a leader in corporate America. And one of the principles was to deal in all matters with the fairness and consistency I would want a leader to deal with me, right? To bring fairness and consistency to my leadership across the board. That was something that was incredibly important to me. Because I know that leadership is challenging the same way that fatherhood is challenging. Being a parent is challenging. So I came with a certain level of intention. I did the same thing with marriage and the same thing with fatherhood. And that's where this came from. But my father, his presence in our home, gave me the opportunity to have 2 sets of lessons. The first is the lessons that I observed, right? These are the lessons that I saw. Just from observing my father, who he was, what he did, and how he moved. Okay. And then the second set of lessons are lessons that he taught. And I want to open up real quickly with those lessons. And then I'm going to begin to get into the first 6 of the 30 lessons that I'll be sharing in this series. All right. Now, the observed lessons from my dad, and many of you have observed lessons from your fathers if your fathers were in the home. The first one was rise early, get up early. I can remember my father, my bedroom was on the main floor. My parents slept upstairs. My siblings, younger siblings slept upstairs. I slept on the main floor. And I can remember my father coming down to the main floor and using the bathroom. And often I would look at the clock. It'd be 5 o'clock in the morning and he would be getting ready for work. It would be 4:50 in the morning. He'd be getting ready for work, doing his thing, moving around the house, the only person up, getting ready for work. And I never realized, you don't realize the impact that's having on you. But as I got older and I was striving for success and looking for routines to create, the one routine that came back to my mind was routine of my dad, of being an early riser, being someone who got up early to go to work. The second observed lesson was his work ethic. One of the things about my dad is he did not mind working. And if you lived in his house, you were going to work too. It was no free meal tickets. Once we became of age and we can move around with him, you're working too. Okay, you're going to go to work. I can remember a time where my dad, it's a Saturday morning. I stayed up late, playing video games or watching a video of some sort. And so I'm sleeping in. It's a Saturday morning, and my father, he walks in and he kicks the bed, and he was like, "It's time to get up, boy." And I'm doing this to my eyes, and he was like, "Look, man, no son of mine is gonna sleep in this house till the afternoon." He was like, "You're gonna work, and so if you want to lay around instead, let's get up and work. Matter of fact, I got a job. Get up, be ready in 30 minutes. You're going on this job with me." My father, he not only worked a job, but he was also an entrepreneur. He had a side hustle for as long as I was growing up. And he would contract, he would paint, he would, fix things and basically renovate properties, etc. And so he said, "You coming with me?" And I hated it. But what I do know is, one, I wouldn't have the skill sets I have today to fix almost anything in a home if it weren't for my dad. Number two, that he taught me, this is the third lesson I observed, entrepreneurship. He taught me what it looked like to be an entrepreneur, and he also taught me what it looked like to be an entrepreneur that delivered with excellence. Because he would often say, "Yeah, you see how we just did that? We won't have any complaints. What we just did was excellent work." And the idea of excellent work is that if they do call me back, they'll call me back for another job, not to complain, or they'll call me back to give a reference. And when you provide excellent work, that's what happens. 3 lessons I observed from my dad. He never turned around and taught it, but I just watched him do it. Then there were some lessons that my father taught. He explicitly taught, like he sat my brother and I down and he taught him. And to be clear, I'm the oldest of 6 children. Okay. I'm the oldest of 6. So you have my brother and I, Ethan, he's 13 months younger than me. And then there's about a 10-year gap between, me and the youngest boy in the family, Quentin, who you guys will hear from on Father's Day. He'll be joining me in the studio. He's a father as well. He actually may call in this morning. But he's a father as well. And then 3 girls, right? So we have 3 baby sisters, 3 girls behind us. All right. And who my father was for me was very different than who he was for my siblings. And the reason I say that is because my mom and dad separated when I was 26. Again, remember the 10-year gap. My brother was 15, 16 years old when that happened. And so he didn't have the opportunity like I did to be with my father, through those formidable years of 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And I did get that opportunity. But here's some of the lessons he taught me as I began to make the transition from adolescence into teenagehood, right, into becoming a man. The first lesson was be wise. He used to always say, be wise. As a matter of fact, I can recall a conversation that my father and I had in my mid-20s when I turned the lesson around on him. He was doing some things. I'm like, "Man, Pops, that's not wise. You taught me to be wise," right? But he would always say, be wise. And one of the things he would say is study the Proverbs. He was like, King Solomon was the wisest man in the world and the wisest man of all time. And if you study the Proverbs, then you can be wise. And I can remember as boys, my brother and I, it'd be a Saturday afternoon and we say, hey, Pop, can we go outside? Hey, Dad, can we go outside? He'd be like, before you go outside, let's read Proverbs. And we'd be like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? He's like, let's read Proverbs. And he opened up the Bible and we go to Proverbs 1 through 31, one of those chapters, right? And we have to read the entire chapter. and I hated it. It felt like torture. But let me tell you something. It did something to me. And later I'm going to talk about wisdom in depth as one of the lessons. As a matter of fact, I believe it's lesson number 4, Solomon's Proverbs. Learning from Solomon's Proverbs is lesson number 4. And I'm going to talk about it in detail because to this day, those proverbs are stuck in my mind. How I make decisions, what I do, how I think, those proverbs are stuck in my head. Some of the laws of the proverbs, it's like, oh, you can't do that. You know, Solomon, you talk about the strange woman. Beware of the strange woman. I spent my life watching out for the strange woman. And let me tell you something. It had a great deal to do with who I've become and what I've been able to accomplish. Because my dad insisted that we read that book. All right, here's the third lesson that he taught. And this is a huge lesson. And by the way, if you know somebody that can benefit from this, I'm telling you, text them, share it with them. For those of you on social media, share the stream, because as I get into these lessons, I'm telling you, they're going to be lessons that I believe we all can learn from. Okay. Now, the third lesson was to be responsible sexually. To be responsible sexually. And my dad, I can remember him having deep conversations. I remember being uncomfortable. He'd be like, we're going to talk about sex. And he would lay it out. Hey, if an adult does this, that's wrong. If a boy does this, that's wrong. Sex is between, he would just go on and on, right? But here's one of the things that, and by the way, that was important because it gave me an idea of what to watch for. So this third lesson was to be responsible sexually. And I remember about the time I was about 14 to 15 years old, he pulled my brother and I in a room and he said, you know what? You boys probably can make babies now. And he started asking us questions about what may have happened for us. And I remember being incredibly embarrassed by it. But man, I think about it now and I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that my dad did these type of things. But he said, well, if this happened in your body, that means you can make babies. And if you can make babies, that means that you're a child and you can make a child. And that is the last thing that you want to do. And then he began to explain why. He was like, hey, if you're a child and you make a child, this can make life challenging for you and your child. Because not only is life going to be challenging for you because now you don't get to live out the rest of your childhood, because now you got to step up and try to become a man for this child. He was like, but also this child won't get a lot of the things they would have got if you were properly prepared. So not only are you ruining in some ways or changing or challenging, creating a challenge you don't have to have in your own life, but you're also bringing a child into the world who's going to have incredible challenges early on because of the challenges that you have. And he was like, so by all means, son, protect your seed. Protect your seed. Now, let me tell you something. Think about that. Protect your seed. Now, this is something my father taught me. He taught me early on. I'm a teenager. And he's like, your seed is valuable. Protect it. Don't just send it anywhere. Don't allow it to just go anywhere. And he gave us a lesson on condoms and all that. And I remember the lesson on condoms. And by the way, my mom's listening right now. I remember him saying, this is between us. Your mom don't need to know about this. I'm going to tell you something, dads. There are some conversations that we have with our sons that are just between our sons. Because that conversation, I'm going to tell you, that conversation, I credit that conversation with the fact that now, as a man, the only child I have is with my wife. And by the way, I'm not saying it from a place of righteousness, because it's not like I was chased. Okay, let's be clear. It's not like I was out here, celibate and chase. I'm not even saying that. What I am saying is that my father taught me some lessons in terms of protecting my seed and protecting my health was the third part of what he talked about with sexual responsibility. That in many ways saved my life. I mean, it changed my life. So those are the lessons that I observed from my father and the lessons that he taught in terms of what it was I needed to know as his son. All right, let's go to line 2. Quentin, I believe this is my brother. What's going on? How you doing, brother?
I'm well, man. I thought this was a really good topic, and me, I'm a new father myself. Son will be 3 in about 6 months. But what I have been able to do is work with young black boys over the last 15 years.
Yeah,
and
very true.
One of the things that I can say, having a lot of face time with them, is that there is a huge need for social emotional learning in the black community, especially amongst our young men, because they grow up angry. They're not afforded an opportunity to express themselves. And a lot of it is sit down, set up, and listen. But
and when you say social emotional learning, break that down a little bit for listeners who may not understand what you mean by that.
Well, social emotional learning is a term that's used in the academic world, and is basically referring to teachers working with the young people on, one, building relationships. Another form of it is learning how to manage them, creating empathy spaces, cooperative learning, and just really kind of gauging where the kid is and kind of getting them to that place of where they need to be able to have that dynamic relationship in the classroom. There's statistics that say that between the grades of 1 to 5, especially among African-American males, if this is not fostered, there will be conflicting relationships not only with the teachers but also with other adults.
So let's back up real quick. So between the ages of 1 to 5, for parents,
between the grades of 1 to 5,
first grade and 5th grade. So what should a parent or father do to ensure that his son doesn't fall into those statistics?
Fostering those emotions at an early age. One of the things that I work on with Wesley constantly is just, even though he really does not know how to articulate and express himself, I always ask him what the problem is. Tell daddy what's wrong. Express yourself. Got a lot of times the young men are not afforded to do that. So they need to learn how to be able to, one, put their feelings into words. And that's something that I struggle with coming into adulthood. I would feel a certain way, but I couldn't articulate how I felt.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't always an opportunity to do that, and it's practice like anything else. And so until I was able to get that practice and, one, understand that I needed it was a constant struggle.
Got it. So what I'm hearing you say is that we want to teach our sons how to express themselves, to express their emotions verbally, so that way they have an outlet for those emotions and they don't come out in other ways.
Exactly, because at this point, I work with a lot of young black men, and once they get to that point where their emotions get to a boiling point, the conflict resolution goes out the door, and all they knew is how to handle it physically, which is why all these boys are picking up guns.
Yep, and you couple the inability to express your emotions verbally with testosterone, and that's what you're going to get. You're going to get some level of physical aggression. Wow.
Exactly.
All right, man. Anything else you got?
Oh, no, that's it.
All right. And your son is how old?
Wesley is 2.5. He will be actually about almost 2 years, 9 months. He's September 22nd. So June 22nd, he'll be 2 years, 9 months, almost 3.
Got it. And by the way, that's my brother. Wesley's my nephew. And man, let me tell you all, my brother's been a big help to me. So I got 10 years of my brother, but he got married before me. He became a father before me. And it's a wonderful thing to have a brother at arms who you're in conversation with that has perspective. And by the way, I mean, he's been teaching for 15 years, working with young black men for 15 years, has a phenomenal perspective on young black boys. and the ability to help young black boys and teach young black boys. And so you're doing phenomenal work, brother. And you'll be in the studio with us on Father's Day, correct?
Yes, sir.
You don't want to miss that show. You see that when I say my brother, y'all probably thinking, oh, yeah, of course he has his brother. But my brother has a high level of competence when it comes to not only fatherhood, but working with young black men. So you don't want to miss that show and some of what he has to offer. Thanks, bro, for calling in, man.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Yep. All right. Let's go to line 2, Darren. Good morning.
Brother Linal, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing pretty good. I just wanted to share with you a lesson that my father taught me.
Please.
Now, when I was 6 or 7 years old, he taught me how to play chess.
Ooh.
And I didn't understand. You know, I'm just a kid. Everybody else is playing checkers.
Right.
Why are you teaching me how to play chess?
Man, yes.
And he taught me that for every action in this world, there's an opposite equal reaction. So you have to think first, second, and third order effects of every choice you make. So I applied that through my whole life, and I'm glad he did that for me because it made me a critical thinker at a young age.
Man, strategy. I mean, chess is the ultimate strategy game. And I love that because what I'm hearing is your father taught you how to consider an action and then the possible consequence of that action 1, 2, 3 moves away.
That's right. He did.
That's huge.
And it paid off rather well for me.
I'm sure.
I went on in the military. I did 26 years. I retired. I have one son, and now he's in college. And I wanted to teach him chess, but he really, I guess my actions kind of rubbed off on him because he thinks the way I do. I'm still trying to teach him chess, but he brushes me off.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. Did you hear the part where I shared the observed lessons that I got from my father? He never taught me. He never sat me down, but watching him, I learned things. So consider that your son observing you has learned a lot.
Yes.
And here's the other thing. Don't stop cornering him, man. Keep trying to get him to sit down and play chess because, it might not be this year, it might not be next year, but at some point, he's going to sit there and play with you. And the dominoes that fall in his mind as he begins to play that game and master that game with you is going to have a tremendous impact on him, but not just him, but also his family. And one day he's going to be trying to corner his son too. So keep it up, man. And by the way, I didn't even think about chess, but it's one of the games I do like. If I'm going to play a game, chess is one of them. If I'm going to play a game on my phone, chess is one of them for those reasons. And I'm adding that to the list of things that I'm going to harass Legend with. So thank you.
Thank you, brother.
All right, man. Thank you for the phone call. That was great. That was awesome, man. Let's get into number 1 that I want to share this morning. And that is the first lesson I will teach my son is his identity. Now, you may ask, all right, Linal, what do you mean? Even now, I tell my son, you are a creator. You are made in the image of God. You have the power of God. And as a result, you are a creator. Right now, my son's favorite word, my wife was like, where did he get this from? She was out of town. I had him over the last week. And I think he got it from his cousin, Wesley. Quentin, if you're watching, Wesley is influencing my son. But the new word is mine. Everything is mine. Mine, right? And he firmly believes it. He reaches for it. He wants it. I'm eating. My food is his food, right? My phone is his phone. My shirt, he wanted to put on one of my basketball shirts. He's mine. I put it on him. And then he realized how big it was. He's like, well, nah, this is not comfortable. I'll take it off. But even now, his words have power. They have power on me. They have power on his mom. They have power on people around him because he's a creator. And that's one of the first things that I will teach him is that you are a creator. And part of his identity is that he's made in the image of God. So because God is a part of his identity, it is incredibly important that throughout his life that he is connected to God. That he is connected to God, that he can feel his presence through prayer, meditation, and listening. Let me tell you all something. We're moving so fast in our society that many of us do not slow down just to get quiet. And one of the things I realize is as we're growing, as we're moving through life, even as he's moving through life, the 21st century is fast now. By the time he becomes an adolescent, it's going to be even at a faster pace. And so if I can begin to teach him now how to slow down, get quiet, meditate, and listen to the voice of God, I know that's one of the most critical lessons. That's why it's lesson number 1. Okay. Pray, meditate, listen, connect to God. Now, the other part of that is to understand, for him to understand that his spirit is his power, that he is not just a physical entity, but he is also a spiritual entity. And more importantly, that he is a soul with a body, not a body with a soul. I believe many of us, we see ourselves as bodies, right? These bodies is one of the reasons why race as a construct has worked so well. Because we see ourselves as bodies, so we identify with one another as the exterior versus the spirit. And the way I will teach my son is that you are a soul with a body, not a body with a soul, but a soul with a body. And in order for you to tap into the spiritual power of your soul, you're going to have to practice silence and understand that you are made in the image of God. So then slow down, and listen to God. And because you're made in the image of God, because you're alive, because you're a soul with a body, you have a divine destiny. And this divine destiny means that you were put on this earth to accomplish something. And what you were put on this earth to do is a huge part of your overall identity. That is how you identify yourself, son. That is how you see yourself as your destiny, as your purpose, through your creator, God, who is a part of you because God is in you. That's the first lesson. It's simple, yet profound. And I believe it's a lesson that many of us still haven't grasped as adults. Many of us have not grasped this lesson that I am a soul with a body. I am a spirit, and I can derive my power to create in this life through my words from my spirit, which means that anything that I declare, and we're going to talk about this later, it's one of the other lessons. Anything that I declare, that as long as I believe I can, and I'm willing to take purposeful action aligned with that, I can create almost anything I want to create in my life. That's lesson number 1. You got to understand your supernatural identity. Because too many of us, we're caught up in the physical, man. And the physical is limited. It has too many limitations. And for my son to fully walk in his purpose as the steward that God has made me for him, I believe that's the first lesson that he has to learn. Okay. Now, the second is his origin. All right. And for a black man, this is important because we're taught origin here in the United States in a way that disempowers us. You go to school, you're in first grade, second grade, third grade, and they start to talk about American history. And you don't see yourself in American history. You don't see yourself in the pictures. You don't see yourself in the pictures of the revolution. You don't see yourselves on the front line defending this country, creating this country. You don't see yourself. And so as a result, you start to wonder, where do I belong? And it's important that my son understands his origin. Son, you are a descendant of Africa. You are a descendant of Africa. Africa is home. Africa is the motherland. Africa is where all life started. And this is the place that we and our ancestors were stolen from. Your existence, hear me out, your existence here now is due to belonging to ancestors who are the strongest of the strong. And because of that, you should be proud of who you are. You should be proud of where you came from. You should be proud of your ancestors. You should be proud of the struggles of the ancestors, because your ancestors are the strongest of the strong. And I know that because they have more fortitude than anyone else on the planet mentally. They have more fortitude than anyone else on the planet physically, and they have more fortitude than anyone else on the planet spiritually. How do I know that? I know that because I've walked through the dungeons of Africa, the slave dungeons. I've seen the torment they had to survive to make sure that we are here. I've seen the hulls of the slave ships. I've seen the chains. And I've witnessed the history. And it's time out for us being ashamed of our past, ashamed that we were slaves. Is there trauma tied to that? Absolutely. And it's time for us to get responsible for it. But our ancestry is one of power. It's one that we should be completely proud of. Because we came from the strongest of the strong, mentally, physically, and spiritually, because the people, our ancestors that survived that, are incredibly strong people, and we are their offsprings, which means we have that same mental fortitude, we have that same physical fortitude, we have that same spiritual fortitude, and by all means, we should not be putting our heads down. I mean, I remember I witnessed a conversation where people were saying, well, my ancestors weren't slaves. They came from this. They came from that. Well, I don't know. And it's almost like if my ancestors were slaves, I should feel bad. Nah. Guess what? My ancestors, they were slaves. Okay. And let me tell you what they went through and what they had to survive in order for me to be here today. And because they survived it, I know they are the strongest of the strong, and I'm proud to be the seed of the man that made the captive trek from Burkina Faso down to the dungeons in Ghana. I'm proud to be a part of the woman from Cameroon that got captured into slavery, but survived it so that my grandparents, so that my parents could have me, so I could be here and I could serve my destiny. I'm proud. And I look to their strength. I look to the strength that they had when I run into my challenges, because my challenges are nothing like the challenges that they had. And so if I can pull my strength from them, I can pull my strength for God. There's nothing that I cannot do. Because if they could survive, then surely I can live my purpose. All right. That's number 2, his origin. All right. Now, the other part of his origin is paternal. And I would encourage anybody who doesn't know this about themselves to check it out. Okay. Because our young people, they are, especially our young men, they have to have an anchor. You know, your purpose is your anchor, but your origin provides you a physical anchor. When we were in Ghana, one of the old teachers, he was talking. He said a man's identity is his language and his name. Both of those were taken from us through slavery. And so then we have to, in some ways, go back and find artificial limbs that we can stand up on. Right. And these are not necessarily artificial. They're real. But legends, his paternal line comes through Burkina Faso, of the Lyalan people. His maternal line goes through me, goes through Cameroon, and through his mother it goes through Cameroon. It's funny. My mom comes through Cameroon. I was attracted to a Cameroonian woman. Go figure. See, some of these things are happening for us subconsciously and spiritually. We don't even know it. But those are things that he will learn, and he will learn about the Burkina Fasans. and how they were once Nubians and how they once ruled the 23rd through 25th dynasty of Egypt and what they did before that. He will learn those things so he understands that his history and who he is much more than what they call American history. I want to talk about the definition of faith. That's number 3. That's lesson number 3. The definition of faith. Because there's a lot of talk about faith, but I don't know that many people are defining what faith is and how to have faith. So let's talk about this. Faith is belief, first and foremost. And it's believing that you can because you can say it. And I want you to think about that. Believing that you can because you can say it. If I can say it, I can achieve it because God as a creator spoke the universe, spoke the world into existence, right? And so then if I'm made in the image of God, that means that if I can speak it, I can create it if I'm willing to take the purposeful action necessary to achieve the supernatural results. And what I find often is the belief without the action. I believe I can, but I just want it to fall out the sky on top of me. That doesn't happen. That's not faith. Faith is belief plus purposeful action, not just any action. It has to be action with the purpose of generating what it is that you said you would create. Purposeful action. Now, we are creators, and faith plus purposeful action provides us supernatural results. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. When I say supernatural results, like, well, Linal, that's easy to talk about. That's easy to theorize. Let me hear an example. Well, I'm going to share a story from my life. I remember when I was in corporate America, mind you, to this day, I still don't have a bachelor's degree. Okay. That doesn't mean I'm not educated. Don't slip. Okay. But I don't have a bachelor's degree. Now, in corporate America, there are certain qualifications in order to achieve certain positions. Now, those of you who know me know my background, know what I achieved in corporate America. And so you may know where I'm going in terms of this story. But there was a time when I was a senior manager. I remember being a senior manager in corporate America. And the next level for me to gain was director. And I had gone and I had talked to my vice president about the role. And she said, well, Linal, in order for you to be a director in this company, you need to have a bachelor's degree. And you don't have a bachelor's degree. And so, unfortunately, I don't know that you can be a director. And so I remember having that conversation with her, and I left her office. And I went home and I made a declaration to myself. And this is important. I made a declaration after hearing the rules. Okay. So there was a rule. You had to have a bachelor's degree. And I said, forget the rules. I'm a creator. I'm going to create myself into that role. And so I went home. I declared myself as a director in that moment. And then I went to my computer and I typed out, I am a director, real large letters on a piece of paper. I printed out 3 of them. I put one on the refrigerator. I put one in the bathroom, and I put one on my vision board. I am a director. Every time I walk past it, I would say, I am a director. Okay. And I kept doing that. Then I began to notice how the directors at the company dressed. And I'm talking about purposeful action, how to take purposeful action, okay, on creating things. Then I looked at the directors in the company and how they dressed, and I noticed they wore slacks with button-ups. And I said, okay, there's another action I can take. And so I started dressing like them. I started acting like a director in my senior manager role, started thinking like, okay, what would a director do? How far would a director take this? How much work would a director do? And I began to visualize myself in the role. What do I mean by that? Often I would be the last person to leave the office. And my director at the time, her office was right there on the corner before I left. And so I would walk up to that corner. I would look into the office. I would close my eyes and I would see myself in that chair. I would see myself in that office as the director. And then I would also look at her name etched out on the glass, and I would close my eyes and I would see my name etched out on the glass. And I would say to myself, I am a director. I will be a director. And finally, after doing this for about a year or more, I decided that, you know what? It's time for me to go have another conversation with the vice president again about this role. So I went back up to the office and I said, hey, you know, I want to talk about the director role. And the vice president, she kind of looked at me and she turned her head and she said, well, I thought I told you that, you know, you have to have a bachelor's degree. I said, yeah. And I think you and I both know that in the role I have today, the level of responsibility won't allow me to, you know, be in school and handle my responsibilities. And, you know, she kind of looked at me like, you know, that's your problem. And that's when I told her, I said, well, here's the deal. I am not going to work and train another director in this role. And so you all have a decision to make. I know that I'm competent. I know what I bring is worthy of being a director at this company. And so that you know, I'm not going to train another director. If another director comes in and I'm not promoted, I will leave the company. Now, I want to be clear when I said these things, I knew the level of value I brought. And one of the lessons I'm going to talk about in terms of teaching my son is always do your best. Make yourself an invaluable, indispensable resource because it can be done if you apply yourself. Okay. And I knew I was valuable. So when I had that conversation, she turned red in the face. She says, well, you know, let me see what can be done. 8 months later, I became a director at that company. I then went on to become a senior director. I then went on to become a vice president, all with no bachelor's degree. When I talk about this formula of faith being the definition of faith being belief plus purposeful action equals supernatural results. I know what I'm talking about. That's just one example. I can go through more. Okay. When I left corporate America was more evidence of the same. Recreating my salary in corporate America was more evidence of the same as an entrepreneur. I know that this works. And that's one of the reasons it's the third lesson that I will teach my son. Declaration plus faith, which is belief, plus purposeful action equals transformation and supernatural results across the board. And that's something I think we can all take, not just for our children, but even for ourselves. I have a different take on Solomon's Proverbs than most people. And I want to hear, because again, my father pounded the Proverbs into us. And there's a theme in Proverbs, 3 themes in Proverbs that I'm going to teach my son through reading the scripture. I mean, I'm not going to deviate much. I'm like, hey, let's sit down, let's read this and tell me what you got from it over and over again. And he's going to be tired of it, but let me tell you, it's had a profound impact in my life. And I believe it'll have a profound impact in his. The first thing that Solomon would say all the time is choose wisdom. Choose wisdom. He would say that, right? So my son, choose wisdom. The second thing that he said a lot, a whole lot, is get an understanding. Get an understanding. Now, let me tell you something about getting an understanding. Lack of understanding is what creates offense. And to be wise is to be patient and seek understanding. And to be offended quickly is to be foolish. Now, I told you all I was going to say some things in here that's going to get people a little upset. But if you're the kind of person that gets upset fast, consider that you might be foolish. Because wisdom, let me back up again. Wisdom is about getting an understanding. And to be wise is to be patient and seek to understand. When you're seeking to understand, 2 things that you're doing. 1 is you're being curious, you're asking questions. 2 is you're listening. You're listening. And some of us talk too much. And to be offended quickly means that you don't understand, which means that you're actually acting from foolish. And I said this earlier, but the pace of the world is so fast that we often fail to slow down, reflect, and to seek understanding of those around us, whether it's our children, whether it's our spouse, whether it's our significant other, whether it's a friend. Some people are losing valuable friendships because they won't slow down and seek to understand. The other thing that Solomon said is always be learning. He didn't say it like that, but what he said is a wise man will listen and increase his understanding. If you're listening and you're increasing your understanding, that means that you're learning. Okay? And to listen, understand, and be wise means that it opens up your capacity to love. Oh man, Linal, how did you make that leap? 2 years ago, when I was doing this segment, I had a gentleman call in, and I had talked about love, and he was like, "Look, man, I don't know about loving everybody. Everybody don't require love. Some people don't require love. Blah 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 blah." And my response to him was this. I told him that the more I understand people, right, in this work that I do as a coach, I'm in intimate conversation with human beings 5 days a week, sometimes more than that, okay? Intimate conversation with human beings who are bearing their soul, who are telling me what's going on in their life, who are processing their thoughts in a safe space, right? A space with no judgment. My role as coach is not to judge in that space. My role as coach is to listen and to understand, not get attached, not get enrolled in the story, but to listen and understand with a discerning ear so I can reflect what I hear with assertions and also ask powerful questions that create awareness. So as I'm doing this as coach, and by the way, this is what leads to transformation, right? Because the other part of the formula is then I'm like, hey, do you believe in yourself? All right, what are the purposeful actions you can take that lead to supernatural results and transformation? But along with that, I'm learning more about people. And as I learn more about people, it increases my understanding. And understanding provides grace. And grace is what creates and opens the road for love. And I'm going to tell you something. The more I do this work, the more capacity I have to love people. To love people no matter where they are, no matter what they say, no matter what they do, no matter how they show up. And part of that is because I don't get offended. There is very little that offends me because I'm always seeking to understand. Now, I'm human. There are times I am offended. If there's anybody that can offend me the most, it's my wife, the people close to us, right? And I love my wife to death. Don't get me wrong. But if you're married, you get what I mean. If you're in a relationship, you get what I mean. I'm human. And I love my wife. Y'all know I love my wife. Okay. I love my wife. So thankful and grateful for her. Okay. And there are times that I don't understand what she does. And when I don't understand what she does, it creates offense. And my point is this. Whenever I slow down and I seek an understanding, it opens the pathway it creates grace in the pathway of love again. And that is the beauty of Proverbs. Proverbs not only teaches us to choose wisdom, it also teaches us to gain an understanding. It also teaches us what it means to learn. A wise man will listen and increase his understanding. But then ultimately, what Solomon does is he gives us the ability to begin to have more grace in a way that opens up our capacity to love. And love is the most powerful force in the world. And if you want to have access to this powerful force, it requires wisdom. And that's a lesson I will teach my son. All right, let's go to lesson number 5. Lesson number 5, lessons to teach my son. Lesson number 5 is the illusion of race. The illusion of race. Now, what is an illusion? An illusion is a magic trick. Right? An illusion is something where you think you see something that you don't, and you don't know if it's there or not. I mean, and race is an illusion. It is nothing more than illusion. Race is a human construct. Now, if you heard lesson number 1, you get this, right? Because when you see yourself as a soul with a body, you begin to realize that it's the soul and the spirit that I really care about. So when I talk about I love people, what I love is the spirit. I love the soul of the man, the spirit of the woman, right? That's what I'm in conversation with. It's not the physical. Doesn't matter what the person looks like. Doesn't matter the color of the person. But what matters most is that they are a living, breathing soul, which means they have God in them. And for me to honor God means I must honor you, no matter what color you are. So this human construct that we've built, in essence, really, the color of man means nothing about the man. The color of woman means nothing about the woman. But somehow we've given it so much power. And here's why. Race and separation was created to control and influences the masses with fear of one another. See, if you're afraid of your neighbor because of their race, if you're afraid of the person standing next to you because of their race, then that fear consumes you. It freezes you, and you don't have the energy to be watching what's happening in government, with the elite, with the mass movements that are happening around us. There's so much infighting, right? And it's happening in the United States right now. The United States is divided. It is not just a conversation of liberals versus conservatives, but in many ways, the United States is more racially divided than it's ever been. And as a result, it is weaker than it's ever been because of this construct, this illusion of race. Now let's go back to Solomon, the Proverbs of Solomon. Prejudice plus misunderstanding. Remember I said that, to be wise is to get an understanding. Okay. So prejudice plus misunderstanding equals a high level of ignorance. Now, what do you mean? Let's back out of it. What is ignorance? Ignorance means to not understand, to not have an understanding, to be uneducated. And so what happens is many of us have cultural ignorance. Many of us have ethnic ignorance. And because we have ignorance in these areas, that creates prejudice. I just worked the formula back for you. That makes sense? And because I don't understand, I have a lack of understanding, I get offended. And because I'm offended, I don't have access to grace and love. And that is one of the major impediments of our society. When you think about America, based on the Constitution and what it stands for, should not be in a place that it's in. But because of this illusion of race, we are weaker than we've ever been. We're weaker than anyone. And let me tell you something. If you don't agree, you need to wake up and look around. Look around you. We're weaker than we've ever been. And I can give you stats. I can give you our debt. I mean, let me tell you something. We have more debt than our military spending. So at any point, that means that our debtors, the people that we owe, could say no more money for you, which means we can't even go to war. We can't even defend ourselves. Folks, that means we're weak. How did we get so weak? Because there's so much inner conflict with the people. The people can't even manage the governing body. Hey, what are you doing? What's going on? Because we're concerned about the skin color. Got to wake up. This is a lesson I'll teach my son. Don't fall for the okie doke, son. Don't get it. Now, it's important for him as a black man to understand how people may see him through ignorance. I'll teach him that. But at the same time, for him, he gets to choose. And what I'll teach him is you got to love everyone, no matter what they look like. No matter what they look like. Because by loving everyone, no matter what they look like, it'll open up extraordinary opportunities for you. And in my life, by extending that level of love, it's created for me a diverse network. It's created for me diverse friendships. It's created things for me that have allowed me to be, wildly successful beyond my dreams. And many of us, we allow the illusion of race to be something that holds us back, that makes us afraid, that makes us feel like we're not enough, that makes us feel a particular type of way. And I'm talking more to my brothers and sisters, okay? And it's time out for that. To know the laws of the land. Oh, man. I don't even know if I have enough time to cover this one, but I'm going to try, okay? Now, why is this important for me to teach my son? Why is this important for us to teach our children? Not too long ago, I was with the young men who were part of the Rites of Passage, and we took them down to the Illinois Supreme Court, and Supreme Court Justice Scott P. Neville Jr. was there, and we talked about the laws of the land with these young men. And they began finding out what a felony is, what a misdemeanor is, and how sometimes you can create a felony without even knowing it. I mean, very simply, a felony can just walk right into a felony. But if you don't know the laws, you don't know that you could be breaking the law, right? So that's the first reason we want to understand the laws of the land. Here's the other reason. Legacy is solidified by law. Legacy, let me say it again. Legacy is solidified by law. Next up, you'll hear Ernesto Borges, who is an attorney, okay? And he's a lawyer, and they have a conversation about what's happening through a legal lens. Why is that important? Because it's important for us to understand the law of the land, but also legacy is solidified by law. What do I mean by that? In our community today, when we obtain wealth, most of the time we lose it. And the reason we lose it is because we don't understand the laws of the land. So our wealth goes into probate court. It's given to the state. Our loved ones, if they don't have the money, if they do have the money, they have to lose a significant amount of money fighting the state, going back and forth with the state about whether or not your legacy that you created, that you built, is theirs, whether or not they can have it, whether or not they should take responsibility for your estate because you don't have trusts in place. You don't have living wills in place. You don't have things that the law requires for you to establish legacy. And because of that, many of us are losing generation after generation. One generation will grow. The next generation has to start all over again, and they grow. They have to start all over again. And that's one of the main reasons when you look at the black community, there's a lack of wealth because we don't understand the laws of the land. So I'll teach my son, retain legal counsel. Even now, there's a woman that I know. She has a brand. The brand is taking off, right? I'm not going to say what the brand is, but the brand is taking off. She's doing incredibly well. I called her up. I said, hey, is that trademark? Do you have the full rights? She says, no, I need to do that. Yes, you need to do that. Now, that was a year ago. She still hasn't done it. Now, let me tell you, if I wasn't a righteous man, if I didn't want to be an honorable man, okay, I'm going to talk about honor as one of the lessons I teach my son. But if I wasn't an honorable man, I would call my attorney. I would say, hey, you know what? Let's trademark so-and-so and so-and-so. After the trademark goes through, then I would have my attorney give her a call and tell her she has to cease and desist so I get 50%. And according to the law, even though she's done all this work, her brand would be mine. But the sister doesn't understand. She doesn't understand because she doesn't know the laws of the land. And so all the work she's doing, if the wrong person happens to follow that formula, will be for nothing. And she'll find herself starting all over again. One of the main reasons we cannot solidify our legacies is because we do not know the law. Here's the last piece to that, and I'm going to close. The good book says, render unto Caesar what is his. I say, yeah, that's what you do. Don't get caught up in those taxes. Pay your taxes, but don't pay a penny more. Many of you are being robbed by Uncle Sam. We're not even teaching our children how to play the game. how to play the tax game. There's certain things we just got to pass down. You know, when Legend gets a certain age, it's time for you to come in. Here's our taxes. Here's what I did. This is why I keep receipts. Hey, keep that receipt. Write on that receipt. Put that receipt in this file. Here's the reason why we put the receipts in that file. Because we're going to render unto Caesar. We're going to pay the taxes that we need to pay, but we're not paying a penny more. And some folks right now, they're all concerned about their pay, don't even realize that Uncle Sam is robbing them because you're paying more than you should pay because you don't know the law. You don't know the law. The last part of that I'll teach my son is preserve our wealth for our lineage. So what I leave you is not just yours, son. What I leave you is your children's, and it's your children's children's. And it's your job to preserve the wealth. It's your job to do what you need to do legally to make sure you maintain the wealth, because real wealth is gained over time. All right, those are the first 6 lessons. Lessons to teach my son. Be sure to join me again next week. We'll go through part 2. 30 lessons, 5-part series. We'll start with lesson number 7. And lesson number 7 is the delusion of religion. You don't want to miss it.
Join Linal Harris every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. here on WVON 1690 AM.